Hello, Carmen Marton. Thanks for the interview. Welcome to Taekwondo Passion. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very happy to have you here.
I'm very
Uh,
excited to take part. It's great to see that, yeah, Taekwondo has got its own like TV streaming site and you're interviewing athletes. So thank you for having me.
Excellent. Great, let's start. In your words, can you give us a little introduction of yourself? Who is Carmen Marton?
Carmen Marton is someone who wants to achieve her dreams and will do whatever it takes and wants to make the world a better place. So that's me.
Excellent. Very a short definition, but great. Great. You started Taekwondo at a very young age. Your father is instructor, right?
Yes.
Do you remember your first Taekwondo class?
I can't remember my first Taekwondo class, but I'm the middle sibling. So I remember going to competitions and watching my sister train and my father train and, wanting to be in there too. And then we moved locations into a different city, and that was a few years before I started. But I do remember some of my younger training sessions, maybe when I was already a yellow belt. I definitely remember my first competition. So I was fighting a boy, and yeah, that was uh, very scary for me. I think no, I wasn't scared to fight a boy. I was scared to have to compete, and I think I lost the fight, but I believed I had won. So I just remember crying. I don't think any child likes to lose, but yeah, it was fine. I've always, I think, liked competition.
Great. Did you, before Taekwondo, did you do another sport?
My taekwondo was the first sport I competed in. And then when I went into high school, so I was 11, 12 years old, I also started volleyball. So that was the second sport, which I did for a couple of years together at the same time with taekwondo. And I represented my state, and we won the Australian Championships. So it's another sport I really loved.
Great. Excellent. And at what age you started with Taekwondo?
I think I was about 8 years old when I
8 years
began.
old.
Yeah.
And
And
since
my,
the start, yes?
yeah,
Since the
continue.
start, you enjoy it?
No.
No, okay, okay.
Um, so because my father was an instructor, we would have to go to our 3 group training sessions with the other students, but then every other day he would train us at home. And I was very lazy. I wanted to watch TV and not train. He had to push us very hard, and he would practice our technique at night as well, and make sure that we had good flexibility and good technical skills, like a really strong base. So at the start, I didn't like it. I think I explain it when you have an older sibling and they want to go to school, and you want to go to school because they go, but as soon as you go, you realize that home is much better and spending time with your mum. But I'm very grateful because, at that age, you don't understand always why your parents are making you do these things, and that it's for your benefit. And being consistent in sport, again, when you're older, you realize how many positive impacts it has on your life, your body, your mental well-being, your social well-being. So that's definitely why I've continued on for so many years.
Excellent. And how was that you started to enjoy Taekwondo and not dropping out?
I believe it was when we started to travel. So when I was 12 years old, I went to our first national championships, the Australian Championships, and that was in Queensland. And, back then, not many people traveled that far. It was my first time on an aeroplane. So I felt so special to be able to get on an aeroplane. And then when I went to Korea 2 years later for the Korean Open, my first international competition at 14, I was just like, wow, it was amazing because we had this huge Australian team, all different clubs from Australia. And then we went to Korea, the homeland of Taekwondo, and then there were all these different countries there. And we ran around crazy, meeting people, doing all the festivities, opening ceremonies, flag ceremonies. We went up to Cookie One, and I just made so many friends. I just realized it was very special, and that's when I think that I was like, okay, I want to do this as long as I can.
That experience in Korea was with your family or with the Australian national team or something like that?
So it was with it was like there was two teams. There was one big group. We had a selection competition for it, which allowed us to get funding, but then it was still an open, so anyone could still come along. And I went with my club had quite a few athletes that competed there, and I went with my sister and my mum. So that was really nice because it usually we would travel with our father because he also coached us, but this time my mum came with us, and she's just beautiful and so relaxed and up for anything. I think it was a very special, moment. It felt like a nice, yes, a sisterhood, female sisterhood.
Great. Your mom also practice? Or
Yes, she does. It took her probably 20 years as well. So she was always the one that was, looking after us, driving us to all our training sessions, early morning. Sometimes we'd have a 7 o'clock start. We'd have to be up at 6 o'clock and, preparing our food, cooking, cleaning, doing extra work, going to study herself to support our family, making sure that we had a roof over our head. And it took her many years for her to start, but she's Chodanbo, so she's going to be going for a black belt soon.
great.
Yeah, she's nearly 60 years old, and I just think it's wonderful. Taekwondo is great that you can start at any age, and she just loves it. She's got her own sort of like a mother's group training class that they train together with, and they have a laugh, but they're also learning some really practical skills.
Great, amazing. How was the experience of going to Korea as a child, going another culture and a culture of so high Taekwondo level?
It was so exciting. I just think that as soon as we went to the airport and I knew I was going to a different country, my eyes were just like this. And I was just soaking in everything from the markets, the different food, and learning about, different breakfasts. We were so used to having, toast and maybe salads or cereal for breakfast. And over there it was vegetables and rice and maybe a little bit of fruit, a lot of, spicy food, which I wasn't used to. And I just think, the big banquet style dining rooms, I hadn't really experienced that sort of like eating and team atmosphere before. And going to such a big competition where there's the local community comes and the children come from the schools and they're holding up big flags and chanting. It was just such a amazing atmosphere. People wanted photos and signatures, and this was as a 14-year-old. So I just didn't realize how popular Taekwondo was across the world. And then just going to learn about the culture, going into Cookie One and seeing the traditional dresses that women and men wear from thousands of years ago, and seeing like their mountains, their countryside, their cities were so different. They were huge compared to Australia. It's a big country, but we have quite small cities. And there they've just got cities and bridges and mountains. And yeah, it was wonderful. And marketplaces, we just don't have that many markets in Australia. I think we're still quite a younger developing countries. We've got a few different cultural groups, but they have these huge markets filled with, sporting goods and clothing, but then also so much food. So, I was definitely very excited and overwhelmed and just trying to take as much in.
So when the organization take you and all of those children to Korea was not only for the competition, you also do some touristing there.
Yes, yes, and I think that's what some really good coaches and team managers understand that, and that's what Taekwondo should be about. It should never be just Taekwondo, just the competition. I tell a lot of students, if I do seminars and talks, like, you have the medal. If you have a good day and you get a medal, you might wear it for 10 minutes and then it's off and you put it in your bag, and I don't know where half my medals are. They're in the drawers somewhere in in the garage. But you know, the memories that you have and these experiences that really help you grow perspective and have learn to build humility for other cultures and understanding for other people and their standards of living, and maybe how fortunate you are and how you can connect with people from all different social classes system. You really see the humanity, and I think sport is a very good segue to that. It takes down barriers and humbles you. So I think that's why it's so important to go out and meet the people and really experience the culture outside of just the competition venue.
Great. And how was the process to making it to the national team of Australia?
So we have a club which has a very strong fighting program, and for us, we had to always do the 3 training sessions a week. It was 3 times a week, and those sessions would go between an hour and a half, and then we would be expected to also do sprint training, weight training, and I've probably started doing some like weight training, even though it was maybe machine weights, since I was 12, and then building up to that, and even doing an extra sport on top of that. Volleyball helped with my fitness and jumping and plyometric activity. So we had to be very consistent. We were never able to take a day off training, and that's the standard our coaches set for us. And I was always put in the competition from a young age. So I think that when I went for my first senior national team when I was 14, I was very prepared, because I'd been doing it since I was 8. Competition, since that first competition fighting a boy. you go and you learn. You go and you learn along the way.
Great. In your club, your instructor was your father?
Yes. So my instructor was my father for the first club that we were at. So we were there up until I got my black belt. So between 8 and 12 years old. It was more of a traditional Taekwondo club, even though we still competed and we did state championships, national championship. Oh no, state championships and club championships. And then when I got my black belt, we went to a more sport focused club where they had a very strong fighting team, and that's where I did my first national championships, which I lost, by the way, and again I was crying. But just they had a great program, and yeah, I've been at that club ever since.
What is that club? What is the name of the main instructor? Your main instructor there?
Yes, so that is Melbourne Taekwondo Centre. So the head instructor is Mr. Jack Rosinski.
And he was with him. You made it to the national team.
Yeah, so he is like the big boss of all the clubs. I think in Victoria we have about 15 different clubs, which are all fall under his umbrella. And I would train out of 3 of those, with 3 different coaches. So I would still do some technical work with my father, but then I was trained for fight-specific training by 3 coaches, which was great. It's a very, I believe, like innovative system. Like usually most clubs maybe just have 1 coach and they will take their training throughout. But this way I feel, very grateful, because I was able to pick the minds of 3 coaches, and they would give us our best in that session, and they would be hungry to teach us. And I know it's a very big responsibility and a big job, and I feel for all the coaches that have to run their whole programs to keep that intensity and passion up, training session after training session. So I had one Greek lady, Lydia Zakis, Alf Deloso, the Italian, and the Hungarian Andrew Rosinski, who is the son of the head instructor, Mr. Rosinski.
Excellent. That was a decision made by the chief, or was of your father, of moving you to different clubs?
Well, that's just the system they have in place. So we have in place. But I know my father, we had to move from the traditional club and pick a fighting club, because there were a few. Victoria is a state which has quite a few fighting clubs, and he asked us to choose. And I had no idea. My sister had a bit more experience with other clubs because she was 2 years older, so she did a few more competitions before I did, interstate and overseas. And so she was able to experience the culture of a few different clubs. And this club in particular, Melbourne Taekwondo Centre, there was one tournament she went to where she was by herself. My father couldn't afford to go. My mother couldn't afford to go. And she was only, I don't know, 13 or 14 years old. And the club that I'm at now, they had some old players we used to know, and they said straight away to her, you know, come hang out with us, you know, it's okay, we'll look after you. So I think from that moment, like having that that friendship and that care really showed what sort of culture that club had. And then so she made that decision, and my dad was like, okay, yeah, I'm very grateful, because now they've, you know, become family, and that's what happens in Taekwondo. It's a whole nother community you are connected to, and it's important to find people that believe in you, but fundamentally care about your well-being, your happiness, your development as a human, who you're going to be in society. They're going to shape your character because you spend so much time with them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Did you have, as you were starting to grow up in Taekwondo, your sister was your sparring partner always?
Yes.
Yes.
Unless we got separated by the coaches because we were fighting too much, and it started to get too rough. Sometimes we had to be put into with different partners. We would definitely train together, and we would most of the time it would be us two together, but we had a lot of depth in our club, that we had other senior females that we train with, senior males, some males around our age and weight divisions. So we would mix it around, but mainly her, and it was always very competitive. And I tell her, I credit her with my success, that she was, you know, probably the best female Australia has produced. And I was fortunate enough for her to kick my butt. So if I knew that I could score a point on my sister, then I would be okay going overseas.
Great. And she was in another weight division of you always?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, there was no point for us to be in the same division. You know, we wanted to travel together as much as possible. And I think, always that little bit like heavier than her, and I'm a few centimeters taller too. So yeah, that always happened.
Excellent. What was your first competition abroad as an Australian national team member?
So my first competition was the Korean Open, but my first national team, I'm just trying to think which came first. I believe it was the World Cup. So I was 14 years old, and it was the Senior World Cup in Vietnam. And back then, the World Cup was like the World Championships, where it was all the weight divisions. There wasn't any team event like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great tournament, and that's where I later on in the two more years I fought Iridia. So the World Cup, I think after that started to change a few years later. But yeah, the World Cup in Vietnam, 14 years old. I traveled over. My parents or none of my coaches could afford to go, so I was there alone with the senior national team, and thankfully they looked after me. It was some really great players, the next wave of Australian fighters. And I fought Korea, I think, first fight. And I remember, training up for that, and my female coach, one of the coaches from the club, she was telling me about positive affirmations, and that's where I started to learn about positive thinking, positive affirmations. She's like, you know, you're going to keep telling yourself you're going to kick her in the head, you're going to kick her in the head, whoever you're fighting. I didn't even know my draw by that time. And I had Korea first fight, and within the first 3 seconds, I remember shuffling back and kicking her in the head. And it happened really fast, like it was in the first couple of seconds of the fight. And then after that, she like kicked my butt. But but just knowing that, like, it was, I didn't know what to expect. Like, I remember just attacking her, like trying to attack the whole time and just kicking a lot of air. not being able to score. I was very, very fresh, and I had the hunger. I didn't feel like I felt like I had no fear, but I didn't understand the gameplay and the strategy, and the players from Korea just have been conditioned to that over so many centuries, years, decades. I'm pretty sure, she went on to medal in that weight division. But I was hooked. Like I loved it. It was another tournament after the Korean Open, my first senior tournament, which, and I was away from my parents. So I just was like, this is amazing. And again, a very different culture, Vietnam, so much history there between Australia and Vietnam. They were still recovering from the war. There was a lot of poverty on the street. It was very confronting as a 14-year-old to see how people were living. But also seeing how beautiful their nature was and how giving and lovely the community was in Vietnam. And of course, loved the food there, loved how everyone was on their scooters, loved their traditional dress and their markets. And yeah, again, it just kept fueling the passion of, this is amazing. I want to keep doing this for as long as I can.
Great. Do you think you realized in that moment the magnitude of a World Cup championship?
Yeah, I already then, like, I didn't feel like that it was the magnitude. I think I was still pretty naive. I think that I loved to fight, and I loved that I had the opportunity to fight. And I wanted to do my club proud. I wanted to do my country proud. And that's all that mattered to me. I think when you get older, you start to be aware a lot more of how big it is. And then you start feeling the pressure. When you're younger, I think it's a lot nicer because it's really pure. It's all about the competition and just wanting to do your best. And then, the pressure comes, the politics comes, and that's when it gets a bit contaminated.
And did you feel something like fighting older competitors because you were 14-year-old and in a senior World Cup?
Yeah, I remember watching so many fights, and a lot of my earlier competitions at Senior World Championships. So later on in that year, I was 15. When I turned 15, I went to the World Championships in Jeju, and my coach, thankfully, was able to come, my female coach, and she as soon as I fought or finished fighting, she was like, you have to record everyone. Look at the players who are doing well. Look at the players who are beating Korea. That's when I, discovered Dominica and how good the Dominican Republic were at Taekwondo, and that were just doing these incredible kicks, and they just had so much fire and passion. And she would have to record. We had that, I think, deeply ingrained in us in the start, that you had the responsibility to learn as much as possible, and not everyone could travel from back home. So you also had that responsibility to record as many fights as you could and take it back home so you could show people what the other countries were doing, how these fights were at the top level. And yeah, so I think that definitely grew as the older I got.
Excellent. Well, after all that, after that start in senior championships, how was your first? Can you tell us about your first Olympic experience? It was in Beijing?
Yes. So my first Olympics in Beijing, I would say, was very tough. I think the preparation and how they selected the team was very tough. They took us to Canberra. We had our National Sport Institute there, and it was very closed off. They selected their group of athletes and they made it very competitive. They didn't want to include a lot of other athletes or any other clubs. So it was hard. It was very cutthroat. They pushed us to be the best and perform under pressure. And the type of training that the head coach did at the time, I didn't feel like it really complemented my style of fighting and what my strengths were. So to navigate that, I think that makes it difficult, because you want to go to the Olympics, so you have to make compromises on what you feel like is right for you, and then listening to the coach and doing what they want. So, as a I think, how old was I? 18 or 20? I can't even remember now. So being away from your family and your club and this support network and having to make such big decisions which can impact your life or how if you go to the Olympics or not, I think that sort of pressure can be hard if you have to make those decisions yourself. And if it's competitive between even the athletes, then you don't even have your friends there. Like your athletes that you're competing with, that were your friends, now you're competing against for a spot. So all of a sudden, maybe they don't want to talk to you, or you can't sit together anymore. And it's very, very silly. So I think that's why I would say it was difficult, because I think it can be managed a different way. I think if you have good leaders, you can still have an atmosphere that's still positive and working towards developing, because such a small amount of athletes get to go to the Olympics, but there are so many tournaments that the rest of the athletes can go to, and it's important to keep them going in the sport for future world championships, future Asian championships, Oceania championships. And if it's too competitive or too negative and closed off, then I think a lot of people have their hearts broken. And I saw many talented athletes after Beijing stop and quit the sport. And that was very difficult for me. That was heartbreaking. I know that they had the same dreams as me, and I would have liked to see them continue on. So all those things I think that don't really get spoken about. Of course, the training's hard, and you're doing your weight sessions 4 times a week, and Taekwondo, we had like 7 sessions a week. Being away from family's hard, but all those other things that don't really get spoken about, I think they weigh the most heavily on your heart and on your shoulders.
Great. And the experience of going to your first Olympics, how was?
Well, that in itself was, once you're there, then you realize how special it is. I think when I was younger, I believe that my childhood dream was always to be a world champion. Once I was in the sport and I knew I had no choice because my father was forcing me to do it, then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be the best. And he would tell us, all of us, and all of the kids, and especially his own children, you're going to be a world champion one day. You can be a world champion one day. Just keep training hard. Keep, focus. Keep believing in yourself. And even my first instructor at our traditional club, he was a Korean head instructor, and he would tell me, you're going to be a world champion. You've got flexible hips. I never had the flexibility. I could never do the splits, and I still can't, but I had good hips. And, it's amazing, because as a child, you believe what older people say, the adults say. So you're like, okay, which is it's so important. I don't think that many coaches or trainers realize how powerful and impactful their words can be, and it's so important to be positive with your students and to make them believe that they can, and reach for the stars. And so I had that as a young child, and going to the Olympics, I didn't realize I wanted to go to the Olympics until I was there, if that makes sense, because I always wanted to be a world champion, but once I got to the Olympics, I was like, okay, now I get it. This is really special. It is a time when, especially in Australia, because Taekwondo in Australia isn't as high profile as our football, our cricket, our other sports. Come Olympic time, we do have a platform. We do have the media on us recording our fights. We do get interviewed more for TV programs or the radio, magazines. So it was like, okay, like now you just start to feel a little bit more acknowledged as an athlete, because you've dedicated your life to be an athlete. You train just as hard as any high profile athlete, but now you're actually getting a little bit more exposure. And I think my competitiveness in wanting to be the best I can be and the best in the world, the Olympics is like another world championships, but it's even more tense. It's got even more pressure. What you have to go through to get there is a lot harder. And that's what I think makes the Olympics a little bit more prestigious in terms of the level of competition. Like, I know we can only have 4 fights at the Olympics compared to 6 fights or 7 fights at the World Championships. There's the differences there. But yeah, I think that going to the Olympics and then being able to experience the village and the other sports, and seeing so many athletes from all across the globe that like in a space that you've never experienced before, in the village, in the food court, being able to bring your family in. So my family, fortunately, we did a lot of fundraising, like my club and community did a lot of fundraising, so my parents could come over, and my sister and brother, and so sharing that with them, which rarely happens when we get to go to the World Championships, that was so special. And being on the mats, then I was like, okay, this is another tournament I want to do really well at, and I want a medal in. Yeah.
But by that time, you already have won a world medal, right?
Yeah, so by that time it was 3 years earlier, which I'd won a medal at the World Championships, so a bronze medal at the 2005 World Championships. And 3 years before that was the 2002 World Cup, where I won a silver medal, where I fought Iridia from Mexico. And
I saw that fight.
but it was difficult. So in our country, even with these medals, they didn't want to include us in programs. We had to fight for more funding. They didn't want to put us on national teams, and it was very difficult for myself, even for my sister, and she was such a strong female athlete. So it was very difficult to push through and persevere through all of that. And I think that that's very unfortunate, because it's wasted energy. Instead of focusing all that energy on your training and preparing for a big tournament, you lose some energy having to fight these external battles too.
You did that as an athlete also, or someone, your father or someone helped with you with that management?
It was usually myself with parents as much as possible, but our coaches at our club, they would help us if we had to take decisions further and go through, say, an appeals process. We had parents at the club which would help us with legal representation, and if the policies weren't fair, then how we could take it further, what strategy we could put in place. But, unfortunately at the moment, and this is across the world, a lot of these policies protect the selectors, they don't protect the athletes. And I hope it can change in the future, because as we're seeing, it's a lot of things are coming out of the woods, as they say, in terms of athletes being exploited and not fairly treated, and they're starting to speak up now. And now a lot of things are changing in the world, and we can no longer tolerate these old school authoritarian type of decision making. It has to be a lot more fairer and transparent, and we need some integrity put back into decision making and policy writing.
Do you think that's a thing like of the way organizations work? Maybe government organizations, you have some money for Taekwondo, and I'm the leader, and I decide in my way, in the way I think is correct, but not maybe in the fairest way or the more sporty decision.
Yeah, I think it happens like as soon as you combine money and power and positions, and there's no accountability. So I think historically, and especially in sport, some people are put into leadership positions where they happen to be a friend of a friend, or they fall into position because no one else is there, and they haven't had the proper training, they don't have the credentials or the experience to actually understand how you're supposed to be a proper leader and how to follow policy. So that's when bias can come into play. Sometimes it's negligence, sometimes it's ignorance, and we've seen that time and time again. And it's not just in our sport or just in our country. Many other countries, it definitely does exist a lot in Taekwondo, where you hear about athletes doing all the right things, but then they're still not selected, or the one person has ultimate power, and that's very dangerous, and they can do whatever they want or treat the athletes poorly, and there's no accountability. So I think that definitely needs to change, and it exists in businesses, and they're trying to tackle that a lot now. Systematic change, how to get the right people in the right positions, and how to actually start developing personal awareness, mental awareness, how you're going to change who you are for the better. How can you challenge your own biases? How can you make sure you're challenging your own ego and you're making decisions which are fair, which are clear, which are following some sort of structure? So if you have to make a decision, it's clear to others why you're making that decision. And the ultimate goal in sport and in Taekwondo is you want to keep athletes at all ages and all levels engaged in the sport for as long as possible. Yeah, and a lot of people won't stop because of injury or funding. They'll stop because their hearts are broken, because it's not fair, and they don't see a future. And it's not about that. Like the Olympics and World Championships and Olympic level is such a small percentage of the sport, and I think we need to try to keep it as inclusive and as many people doing Taekwondo as possible for as long as possible, because we all know the benefits. You know, you're going to increase, as I mentioned before, your physical well-being, mental well-being, social well-being. You know, these are our future leaders. It's an extra support network for children outside of school, which is really important, because school can be tough, and it could also be another system which doesn't work for everyone. But sport is a great way to shape young adults and help them, again, grow and be really good humans in society. So, yeah, I hope it gets better. I'm working on it.
Great. That's a common thing for athletes of sports not so popular, that they have to struggle with these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you think that also very competitive athletes like you, that always that they have their objectives clear, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to fight on the tatami, but also on the maybe political side, or doing all the arrangements? Do you think that helped you maybe later in your career struggle with all of that and then make you stronger?
Yeah, there's definitely two ways to it. Like it's made me more determined, knowing I've had to work very hard for it. And I do, again, get competitive because I want to prove these people wrong. And I don't want to let them stop me, no matter how poor their treatment or negative their treatment was of me and of other athlete. I feel almost like that responsibility is like, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do it for every other athlete who was burnt, who didn't have the opportunity, who wasn't afforded a fair opportunity to do what I do. I feel like a responsibility to keep going because of that. And it does make you more resilient in a way where if you can survive that, then you can do other things. But I still don't know. Like it's an unknown. Who knows if that never happened, and if they were good at the start, maybe I could still be resilient. I don't know if that caused that. I would rather it have never occurred and more people have had a more positive experience in sport than that have happened just to build resilience up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll see. And there was another point I wanted to make on that, but I can't remember. It'll come back to me. We can move on.
Okay, we can come back if you
Yeah.
remember it. Let's go back to your World Championships in Puebla, Mexico.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about all the process before the World Championship, the training? How did you feel in the preparation competitions, and then in the day of the you fought on the last day, right? And
Yeah.
last fight.
Last female fight. Yeah, last female fight, last day. It was like a textbook fairy tale. Yeah. Okay, so I would say that our preparation for the World Championships started quite soon after the Olympics. So the Olympics were August. September, we sort of had our first selection competitions for Australia to prepare for that. So September, October, we were already doing our pre-season training. So we're doing a lot of sprints, weights, training Taekwondo because we knew in January we had to go for our national team trials. January, February. So we were preparing for that for a few months. And then in February, we had our national selections. And then we went, after we qualified, to Europe to do a few tournaments. And again, building up testing. After Europe, then we had our final preparation. So all this time, there's different stages. So from the year before, I felt like our in October, our preparation had started. And then to really get specific, we would have our 6 to 8 weeks before a major tournament. And I would have been doing about 4 Taekwondo sessions a week, 2 gym sessions, and 1 sprint session. And probably the sprint sessions were the hardest. Sprint and conditioning, because I hate running. I hate fitness. But it is the best thing for you. I think in Taekwondo, you need like an Everest session. I'd call it an Everest session where you need at least 1 session a week, which you feel like you've conquered Mount Everest. And for me to get that adaptation of being really, really fit and feel a whole, something for me, especially that where I was lacking, then that was a really big focus. Typically we'd have like our training would be technical footwork, like using the ring management. And then we'd have a session which would be more fighting based and scenario based. And then we'd have like a Taekwondo fitness, specific fitness class too. So that was the build up. And then when we went to Europe earlier in the year, we flew back, and one of our athletes had gone to La Loma, to do some training there. And he called us up and he said the training is here really good. They're going to have the like a competition, like a World Open, where a lot of international countries are coming from South America, from Europe. Germany was there too, and a few other top countries. And so we made the decision literally in 2 days to go to La Loma. It was actually Raul who recommended that we go and train there. And we booked our flights. Like my father ended up having to lend us some money and paid for my flights, because my sister, my brother, and myself had been on that team, and they happened to have special prices on the airline. So we went on the worst possible airline. My brother was trying to sleep on the floor, and I remember them giving us some like food that looked like it was like probably like the worst airplane food I've ever seen, but we didn't care. We were so excited. And we got into Mexico City at like 2:00 in the morning, and then we had to catch a bus to La Loma, and that was great. So we did the training at La Loma. We experienced like a World Open, and we experienced what it was like. For us, it was really important to see what happened in terms of the altitude. So that was a great test. And I remember speaking with the sports scientists from the German national team, and we were experiencing these symptoms of losing weight, losing hydration, and where the fatigue was. So that was great. And even in fighting in those conditions, seeing how our body was and where our concentration was, all of that preparation, it all added information. The European competitions, I was just learning, okay, where, like, I was trying to probably attack too much. I had to like bring back my fighting, so I had a happy medium. And then in that World Open, I fought, I think, Germany there, and I think that I was too relaxed in my fighting, so I had to lift up the intensity. Like I learned all these lessons which I didn't realize would serve me. Well, I did realize like you use them to prepare for a big competition, but I just didn't realize how specific they would be to that World Championships. And then we went back to Australia. We had that 8 to 6 week competition. We went back to La Loma, so we did our acclimatization. So we were in Mexico for 2 weeks before the tournament. which is, they say in terms of sports science, you get the full adaptation between in 14 days. And I competed on the last day of the World Championships, which meant I had an extra week on top of that to acclimatize, and I felt great. So that was really important for us. Like, we had a big strategy. We knew what sort of training we were going to do at La Loma to make sure that we acclimatized, and then also had the proper taper a couple of days before. And we were just very, very prepared. Leading up to that tournament, I'd been working with a mental performance coach for the last 3 years. And for me, I was always struggling at the quarterfinal, semi-final stage. That's when my mental stage, I think I plateaued or I dropped down. So we really were working on, after every fight, where my mental stage had to be. And I was able to take probably every single lesson, especially in those last 6 months leading up to that, but for the last 20 years, and then put it into that one day and be very, very focused. I knew exactly what I had to do and what state I had to be in, what my physiology had to be like in every fight as I progressed throughout the day.
For us, do you have any certain fight that you thought I can make it, or that you in any particular moment that you have certain struggle in a fight?
Yeah, it was actually, I was interviewed this straight after I got off the match, like which was my toughest fight. And my instinct was, and I don't know why, like, and I should have said this, and I regret not saying it because I don't think I gave the girl enough credit. It was India. It was my first fight. And I ended up saying Sweden, even though that was a very difficult fight too. And I came very close to letting that one go. But my first fight was my toughest because I was really tense. Even though I was really focused, that first fight, I had that tension where you're trying to force everything too much. And the Indian girl, she hit me probably like twice in the face. And back then it had to be like a stronger hit for the referees to register. And I remember not moving my head, and she wanted her coach to protest. And I, again, went back to my experience at the Olympics in London before, where I allowed the girl to protest, and they ended up taking the points off. So instead of keeping fighting back then, I led her to protest, and that's a whole nother story because she didn't do the same thing for me. And I didn't get the points back. So I learned that lesson. I was like, no, if the referees didn't score it, just keep fighting. And yeah, so I ended up, it could have been a very different fight if I didn't have that strategy, if I didn't tap into the lessons which I had learnt the year before, and play the game the way it's supposed to be played, and use the good decisions when they come your way, knowing that the only other option is you go home with nothing. She was the toughest fighter. Like, she played it really well, and I was really tense and almost running in, but I was able to get through. So just took it to my advantage.
You think it's a mistake as a high competitive athlete to let the other guy protest if you can avoid it?
If you can avoid it, yes. I only say that because you can't guarantee they're going to accommodate you back. Because at the Olympics in London, that's exactly what happened. I allowed my opponent to protest, and I could have finished the second round, gone into the third round 3 points ahead. And instead it went back to 0-0, and they awarded her point to their head, where when I protested and I had my hand up, and when she kicked, it didn't actually hit my head guard because my hand was there, and they only looked at the video referencing this way. I wasn't afforded that same opportunity, and then I kicked her in the head again, and then they didn't score it, but I'd lost my protest card. So I was just like, like I could have just kept on fighting and let that be the responsibility of her coach, not my. It wasn't my responsibility to get her to protest. It was her coach's responsibility. And so if he didn't do his job, then I should have taken that opportunity. That's part of the game too. So yeah, I only say that is like take the opportunities when it comes your way, because a lot of the time in the sport it doesn't go your way. So when they do, I feel now it's our responsibility to make the most of it.
Great. You start fighting in the traditional way with no electronic protector system.
Yep.
And then you went into only the chest protector, and you always you fight all the styles with how do you find them? Because your first world medal was on normal, the traditional way, and your goal was with only the chest protector, right, in Puebla?
Yep. Yep.
And now you still have fought with the electronic helmet protector. How do you find it?
Well, I think I do prefer data. I think internationally it made it fairer at an electronic system, especially for the body. For the head, I'm a bit on the fence because I prefer the referees scoring the headshots, because I've experienced and I've seen too many headshots which have hit in the face and like they've been like blood noses but no scores. And the referees in the center don't have the confidence still to put their hand up and say that was a headshot. And then sometimes with their head kicks, there's this like static, like it doesn't even hit the head guard and points come up. There's like these phantom points where it's just, somewhere around here, but it doesn't actually hit. And then you see other shots where they do hit the headshot and you see the opponents, their head go back and no points come up. So I guess that's knowing as an athlete how hard it is to score a headshot, to land it, to get the timing right, the distance right, and then it not be awarded because it's not registering on the head guard. It's a little bit more inconsistent. And there are some awesome shots, some like axe kicks to the face and head kicks around the backs, which aren't scoring, and they can make a difference in the fight. And so that's my preference. Either they have to improve the technology, come up with something against the face, because it's such a traditional kick, the axe kick off the front. And I prefer having that little bit of like contact, not just static or air or scrapes, but actually have to have your toe or your foot make contact and sort of move the head guard a little bit more.
Great. You fought in less than 53, but also in 73.
Yeah.
Why? Why and how was that?
Good question. So why? Because that was the only opportunity I had. And all of them have been really challenging and amazing. So I tell my students when I give talks that I have done 5 out of the 8 weight divisions. My sister's done 6 out of the 8 divisions. And you just go where the opportunity is. And also the game changes. So you don't know where your strengths lie. For the Beijing Olympics, the only 2 divisions we knew they were going to select was 67 and heavyweight. And they had already pretty much selected the 67 girls. So my only opportunity was to go in heavyweight. It was, eating more, putting on more muscle mass, going to the gym, having to do some water loading as well to get into that heavier weight division. But in doing so, I was able to get a bit more funding. I was able to go overseas and still compete in tournaments. If that was the only opportunity to go overseas, then I was going to do it, because during that time in your 20s, that's so important to get that international experience. No matter what division you're in, you're still going to learn so much about your game, about yourself, strategy, trends. And so it doesn't matter. And you'd be surprised. Like, look at, and I love her so much. She's such an awesome fighter, Maria Espinosa. look at her on the street with her height, and she's so lean too. You'd be like, no way is she a heavyweight fighter. But she has won everything in that middleweight division, heavyweight division. Olympics, World Championships, Pan American Games and Championships. And she just has that, and I love that about our sport. You can have the right strategy, the right timing, the right distance, and you can outsmart your opponent. It's not just about your body, height, weight, how skilled you are. It's about those things. Like the decision making ultimately is probably like there's at the top level you have to have a high standard of that, but that X factor is going to be that decision making and strategy. And yeah, so I think I encourage athletes to explore the different weight divisions. Now we're seeing a lot of tall athletes in the lighter weight divisions, and that's really difficult. It's another element of having to diet, and it adds in another pressure, but then you can have that reward at the end of it if you do have that little bit of advantage. So you see a lot of players that are taller going down 1 or 2 weight divisions, hopefully all safely and with proper dietary advice from sports dietitians. But yeah, it makes it exciting. That's I've enjoyed fighting all different divisions. I really enjoyed fighting middleweight and even bantamweight, and maybe I'll do bantamweight one more time. Now my sister, she used to fight that division, and yeah, so now that she's taking a bit of time off, I would love to explore that weight division too.
For an athlete that is starting maybe, or what would you say that you have learned from fighting, for example, heavier divisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So it's important if you're fighting heavier divisions and say you may be shorter, it's important to keep your speed up and your follow-up up. You can't beat them on power, but you can beat them on your footwork and your timing and distance. And I know for me, I was jamming up the fight a lot and working in really close. So I would take them on. You wouldn't want to be going back and falling back into their kicks if they've got longer legs. I was like moving a lot of the time, and then jamming them up and working in really close.
Great.
So yeah, go for it.
Excellent. I recently saw that your club had a 60-year anniversary.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Is the oldest club in Australia?
I believe so. Well, I think it probably would be. There may be some Korean clubs which may be older, but our club head instructor, Mr. Jack Rosinski, he was the first non-Korean to get his black belt in Australia, and established his club in 1963. And gosh, yeah, he's built a really good community. As I mentioned, probably 15 or 16 clubs and different branches now. Really good sports and fighting program, great culture, and I don't know how many thousand people have achieved their black belts. Like, it's just amazing for our sport, and you carry those lessons for the rest of your life. And I think that it's been great to be part of a club that has a history rich in fighting for justice, fighting for the right thing, and yeah, they've led by example. So that's why I think they've persevered for so long, because they're very clear on who they are, what they stand for, and they stand by the values of our sport. Having humility, having integrity in what they do. That real spirit.
Great. And how do you see Taekwondo nowadays? And how would you like to be Taekwondo, the sport side, of course, in the future?
So it's exciting. Like, I think there's many countries which are really trying to elevate Taekwondo as a sport within their country, and combat sports now, they see the potential in it and how many medals it could get them at the World Championships through Taekwondo. Karate is going to be in the next Olympics too, and how it can reach so many different countries and social levels too. It's a sport compared to a lot of other sport which isn't as expensive to compete in terms of the equipment that you use. It gives a lot of opportunities to, you know, African countries, Southeast Asian, like poorer countries. They can still be amazing in Taekwondo, and this is so valuable because then these athletes become future leaders in their communities. So I think that governments have started to really see why Taekwondo is so special, and other martial arts sports and combat sports, and investments are starting to come in, which is great, and taking the sport to a more professional level in terms of their strength and conditioning, sports science. I think we're going to see real actual athletes in terms of their physiology, their mental strength and awareness. I think it's going to evolve again, and we're going to have some really awesome athletes competing in Taekwondo. And it's been great to see, like, a lot of athletes now are staying on for longer and seeing that they can do this as their career. Before, when I was growing up, especially in Korea, you would see the top athletes maybe do 1 or 2 world championships and that's it, or 1 Olympics and that's it, where now they've created this system with the ranking points that they can keep the competing if that's what they want to do. That culture's training that, oh, you've done 1 cycle, now retire, let the next wave come through. It's like, no, actually, I've dedicated my life to this. I love doing this. This is who I am. I want to continue on. And now that's encouraged. That's not pushed down. That's encouraged. Like, yeah, keep going. Like, keep winning medals. Keep fighting because you love it. And if you're willing to do the work, then by all means. So I really like that. And I hope that there's more. My hopes for the future would be more inclusiveness, more connectedness between the Pacific countries, the islander countries, those that need a lot more support and a lot more exposure to tournaments. Then I hope we can elevate that also in Asia, Southeast Asia, maybe the poorer South American and African countries. I think it's time the more developed countries start lifting them up too, because it's only going to benefit us. Like, we know the long-term positive impacts of sport. So yeah, we need to start lifting up everybody.
Right. How is that side of Taekwondo in Oceania with all that islands? I guess, and Australia is a big country.
Yeah.
How do they do to gather for tournaments and all that stuff?
At the moment, it's only really we get together for the Oceania Championships and Pacific Games. And some of those athletes, but only a few, get to come to Australia, maybe for the Australian Open, or to New Zealand for the New Zealand Open. It's a bit closer for them. So it's been really minimal at the moment, and it has a lot of potential. But it's difficult because it's quite complex. It's not as simple as just throwing money at them. You have to understand there's a lot of cultural issues that you need to consider, that you need to work within the community leaders to really help them understand why this is important and why they would want to get on board. Because, you know, some people aren't thinking about training in those countries. They're thinking about going to work and getting food for their families. So there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed, but it's just getting the right people who are passionate, that really want to do the work, that are willing to be a little bit more progressive and empathetic in their thinking, not just one directional. It's about having conversations, really understanding what these different cultures need, how they function, and meet in the middle somewhere.
Great. This year, you were planning to compete this year?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, as much as possible. So we were towards the end of our Olympic qualification. We were in Europe at the time for our final Olympic selection tournament. So we had another 3 tournaments to compete in, or two tournaments to compete in. And now, you know, everything has been put on hold because of the virus, and we still don't know how they're going to select the team, if next year we're even going to be able to travel before the Olympics, if we'll need to do an internal, you know, within Australia, or a fight off, if they're going to choose or still make us go overseas. So we're not sure. We're just training and having to be prepared for when they do announce something.
Okay. So you are training like if you were in normal season.
Yes, pretty much. Probably a bit more pre-season work now because we don't have any tournaments coming up directly. Even within Australia, we're not doing as much fighting, and we still have to. Some states within Australia, we can't do any contact fighting. Like in Melbourne, we still have to keep our distance. We can only do technical work. Some northern cities can do a little bit more fighting. But yeah, we're going to have to just work with what our government says in terms of the restrictions and take it from there. Hopefully, towards the end of the year, things can start opening up again and overseas travel can open up again. At the moment in Australia, they've been pretty strict with who can and can't leave the country.
Do you know any athlete nowadays? I guess maybe could be one or two, I'm not sure, that has a longest career as you right now?
They wouldn't be too far off. Like from Australia, maybe a couple of years behind me would be Safwan. So he's been to quite a few world championships and has been doing it as a junior. We met at juniors. So I only think he's about probably in terms of competing only 3 years behind me. So he's nearly been doing it just as long. My younger brother's he's been doing it since he was three years old, and gosh, he's 28 now, so he's been involved in Taekwondo as a sport and going to all our tournaments since he was a young kid. And a lot of athletes, even probably, as I mentioned before, Maria Espinosa has been around for so long now too, and is still at the top of her game. And a few athletes in Europe as well. At the top of my head, I can't remember, but it's great to see. It's not a abnormality anymore. Probably, yes, from America, Stephen Lambden. Give him a shout out.
You still enjoy fighting and all the excitement of the sport?
Yes. Fighting's my favorite part. I don't like trading. I do it because I have to. I do love some training sessions, like when you're consistent and you can see your body adapting and you're progressing, and I'm still motivated to get better at my kicks and the turning kicks, and I want to do the climbing kicks that like my sister would just do so easily, and my brother just does a spin so easy, and I have to work so much harder to get those right. So I'm motivated by that. I think that's probably more of the martial artist mentality, is you want to keep getting better, keep filling the holes, keep learning from other sports, like from kung fu, from boxing, from mixed martial arts, and see what they do, and even other non martial arts sports like football and tennis, and seeing how they have understood the body and what they have learned, and try to pick their brains and speed up our development. So things like that really still interest me. And I know that Taekwondo and your sporting career is really only, even though I've been doing it for a long time, but in the scope of it all, it's such a small time in your life, and it goes by. And I speak about this to others as well. Like our coaches would tell us, like it's a small part of your life, and it will be over in a blink of an eye. And I realized that you physically can't probably do the sport at the top level forever. So I'm trying to make the most of it while I can, because I know as soon as I stop, then that will be it. It's a lot harder to come back if you change your mind. It's a lot easier to keep going and maintain it. It's still hard work, but yeah, I know it's not going to be forever. And thankfully, so far, my body's been okay. I haven't had any major injuries. I still have the support of my family, my coaches. So, and I know that not everyone has that. So why not?
Great. Raul told me that I think the first time he met you, you were doing some hip drills, and that you and your sister continue training after the session. That's a common thing of you, to do that extra work?
I can't even remember that. That's amazing he remembered that. Yeah. Maybe probably my sister wanted to train. She's more that way inclined. Like if she doesn't get anything, she'll be like, no, I have to go more until I get it. And sometimes you do. And I think, yeah, I would be more like I give my max and either I do as much as I can in that session. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay because I know I've given my max and then I will like to go home. But then there are definitely some sessions, especially if it's technical and you're learning something new, it's good to repeat, and to feel it. And before the 2005 World Championships, I spent 5 weeks in Taiwan to train and prepare for our selection and for the World Championships. And we trained at one of their top universities. Same thing, twice a day, most days a week. And after their training sessions, they would just practice their roundhouse kick, the most basic kick that we thought, back leg roundhouse kick and front leg roundhouse kick. And they would spend another hour just going roundhouse kick, roundhouse kick, roundhouse kick, because biomechanically they were trying to go like not waste as much energy as you could, make it as fast, direct, effective, powerful as you could, and not waste any energy. So it was just wow, pop, pop. And what was your body? What was the top half of your body doing? What was your hip doing? What was your leg doing? And what was the timing of it? And we'll just go over and over again. So for us, that they were already so talented, and they were still practicing the basics. And even my father, he's always like, you need to keep practicing the basics. Yeah, I think probably I understood that from a young age, and it's good to do it. And if you're honest with yourself, then you know where you're lacking, and you're going to have to do that extra work on top of it.
Great. Now, can you tell us about the Pink Belt program in which you participate?
This is amazing. I'm so glad you asked me about this. So I would love to see this program go worldwide, and I definitely want to speak with my female network. The Pink Belt Project is an initiative started by a mother at one of our clubs out in, I think, Western Australia. So one of her friends had stopped Taekwondo, a lady she had met had stopped Taekwondo, and this mum, she knew that this woman loves the sport, so she couldn't understand why she had stopped. And it was because in her life she had experienced domestic violence and could no longer afford to come to the classes. And so this incredible mum decided to just start a fundraising group to be able to fund this mum's taekwondo classes for a year. And she realized that this is not an anomaly. This happens all across the world. It happens to many women in Australia, unfortunately, tragically. So she decided to build up this program that would fundraise and be given to a woman who had experienced domestic violence, and provide them with a year training for free at a club, and provide them with the uniform, the belts, any grading fees would be covered in that, any equipment that they needed, shin guards would be included in this 1 year. And that's so important because we all know with Taekwondo, and I know for myself, Taekwondo isn't just about the sport. It isn't just about the skills. It is about the community. It is about empowering. It's about feeling good about yourself that you learned something in a class and you have friends outside of your normal day-to-day life in this social group that are going to support you, and they're going to be positive, and they're going to go through the struggle of learning something new and being uncomfortable, but then being able to confirm that you actually can do something new, something different, something scary, and it gives you that power, and it allows you to go through the process of the class, learning, building, as well as the self-defense side, of course, to be able to protect yourself and to feel confident that you can fight back, which is very important. And, God forbid that you're in that situation again in your life or ever in your life, but it's there. And having that confidence and that community and knowing that you can achieve something in the face of adversity, after you've experienced something in your life where it's broken you, then sport, and in Taekwondo in particular, it can build you up. And that's why, it's great that it's classes. It's great that it's learning. It's great that it's a community, and it's that for a year. And then hopefully that can continue on and have like better flow on effects, and they can continue this, find themselves in a better position. And what's great is that this has grown now. So what the charity initially did was it would fundraise the money, and then it would give that money to the club to cover the costs for the year. Now what we're doing is we're teaming up with clubs that we'll give them one class, we'll fund one female student, but then they will also match that by offering an additional scholarship that their club will then sponsor. So instead of it being one now, they're like, this is great, we're going to have two. So that's grown. And that's, really made, it's a way to give back. And clubs, it's an extra person in their class, which they might not even feel, they might not even notice. And I know there's a lot of clubs which do a lot of this work, and they help out a lot of struggling families. But I think it's important for women, and it will make them feel like they're special and they're worthy, and it turns such a negative experience it's to something positive. I know there's a lot of healing to be done, but this is one good thing which can help them. And so I am an ambassador for this charity, and I believe it can go worldwide, and I'd love to see it worldwide and get it moving. But in Australia, we've started it off, and I like to encourage women to apply from every sort of, hard experience they have. And, we encourage any women, even if it's not domestic violence, if it's some sort of trouble in their life, to apply. And we try to help as many women as we can. Even if we run out of funding, then we try to reach out to other clubs and see what they can do. So it's all about using our network and really trying to involve people in something that is, fundamentally, it could just change a woman's life.
Amazing. I like what you said. The main focus is not obviously the self-defense, but the social part, that social empower.
Totally.
Great.
Totally. I know how much it's helped my life. As I mentioned, my coaches have become my best friends, my mentors, and they've guided me, and I know that I can rely on them. So that's why, having this support is so important.
Great. And in another topic, I understand that you made the stunts.
Yes, I'm starting out. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I did an acting and performance course, and I really want to get into stunt work, and would love to get into like the Asian fighting movie scene and action movie scene. So I'm definitely working on it. I still have a few more accreditations to do. Just to make sure that I'm all accredited and it's all safe, and I know what I'm doing a little bit more.
Is there a movie industry in Australia, or you'd like to do maybe another place?
There is in Australia, but it's not as strong as probably like the Hong Kong market or the American market for music, movies and streaming, even Europe as well. Unfortunately, our government doesn't support the arts as much as we would like, and they've recently had to cut even more funding after, right before the virus, and there's not a lot of support for those workers. But I still want to go for it.
Great. Amazing.
Yeah, there's a pathway, and we are still really close to Asia, and demographically it's not too far of a flight away, and there's a lot of connection between the two and where they record, and so I think that it's definitely possible. It's just like Taekwondo, it's going to be a whole new journey, I'm going to have to work really hard. I'm going to have some tough times and I'm going to have to learn along the way. But if I surround myself with good people and get good advice and keep my head down, then I really believe it's possible.
Great. And the UFC?
UFC, yeah, that's another one. Still thinking about it, how and when that looks like, because I have to fit everything in. But who knows? There's a female from, I think, South American female athlete at the moment who has a Taekwondo background, and she's been doing well. And I think it's great Taekwondo with their kicks and understanding the fight and distance. It gives, I think a real exciting element to UFC. And how they're staging the fights and how they get there, I still think it's a really great platform and a career progression for Taekwondo athletes. Of course, you'd have to learn the grappling, the BJJ, more hand striking and the boxing too. But once you understand the fight, then I think probably that's the hardest thing to attain. But I would like to. How it looks like, again, there's a few connections there that I would like to continue to explore. If I can do it, amazing, amazing, but it will still take a lot of time and work. So we'll see.
You like the idea. You don't say no.
Yeah,
You are
exactly.
very interested.
Yeah.
Amazing. That would be amazing. I think there's some fighters with that Taekwondo background, but I think there are not from that are coming from the elite level of Taekwondo that have done something in the UFC, right?
Yeah, there are. Well, there was, oh gosh, let me just check her name. But yeah, we've, even Ronda Rousey, she was judo and she got a bronze medal at one of the Olympics as a judo athlete. So I think, and she was just so successful and was like a pioneer for females in UFC. So coming from a more of an, athlete background and then taking it to that full contact UFC level, like that gives me a lot of belief because, she didn't know the contact. She didn't know the kicks. Like judo, which is still such an important part of UFC, is grappling, throwing, and she was able to learn those other elements and just capitalize on her career as an athlete, an Olympic athlete. So having that sort of paved out in front of me and seeing how it's then led her to be able to have a career in film and then now the wrestling, the WWE. Yeah, there's just so many opportunities that come from that. So why not make sport your life? And I love that, how she's done that. And I would like to do that too.
Great. Amazing. You are a world champion, but you're still pointing high.
Totally.
Great. Do you have certain middle term project that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I think it would just be that. I would like to, what we just spoke about, and I'm also still studying. So I'm doing my master's in business administration and also a shorter course on director positions. So I would like to make our sporting systems better. I would like to start lifting up female athletes and in particular female coaches and female trainers, because I think that if we can have more females in those leadership positions, that's really important. They need to be there to bring diversity into thought, into planning, and also to show young females that maybe don't just want to be an athlete, that want to have a career in sport, that there is a pathway for them. And we go to these tournaments where it's the World Championships or the Grand Prix, and there's only a couple of females around, and we're in 2020, females that are coaching, and there's some successful ones. Chinese female coaches in Korea, they've got a few more female coaches which are part of the national team now, but it's still moving at a very slow pace. And if half of our team is female, then I just don't get it. You can't tell me that females aren't good coaches or they don't know what they're talking about, because there's plenty who dedicate their life to their sport and to this sport in particular, that have so much knowledge and can offer something, but they're just not given an opportunity. So I think we need to, again, start giving them opportunities, paving those pathways for them, and then educating the coaches and managers and directors a little bit more on how they can do things better, how they can challenge themselves. And I touched on it earlier of it's just not about themselves, their ego or their pride. It's really about how can we keep everyone engaged in Taekwondo? How can we make it a positive experience in their life, that they want to come back, that they want to give back into the sport, that they want to be there for the next generation to make it better. So I think we need to keep challenging ourselves and evolving what Taekwondo is and how it has this potential to be such a great thing, such an inclusive, big global sport.
Amazing. Great. Is there a book that you've given most as a gift, and why? If not, what are 1 to 3 books that have influenced your life more?
Well, I think as a gift, I probably gave The Alchemist because it was really easy to read. And it's a little bit philosophical, but done in a storytelling way. So that one I probably gave as a gift. At the moment, I'm reading finance books. Not finance books. I think I got it here.
Okay.
So I found this one, The Richest Man in Babylon, and The $1,000 Project. So I follow this lady on Instagram. I'll send it to you as well. So because all our money has gone on Taekwondo, we don't have that many savings. We weren't thinking about the future, which is important to do. And as a female in particular, because females, the statistics right now, the facts right now are we make less money than men for doing the same roles. We are less likely to achieve the top level positions, the higher paying positions. There is still almost like a 50% divorce rate, which means that there's going to be a lot of female single mothers who then have to pay for childcare as well. So they'll lose their money there, and they'll end up with less super, so less social support so in Australia, a part of your wage goes into your retirement. So if you're not making as much, if you're not allowed to go up to those higher positions when you retire, and then you have to potentially pay for childcare, then you're going to end up with less money when you retire, when you're older. And some women, when they get married and they have families, that's that time where they're not going to be able to make money too, and it's up to their husband to make it. And sometimes, worst case scenario, if you split up and then you haven't been able to progress your career as a woman, and your husband's been working this whole time, or ex-husband now, you're left with nothing. So in Australia, I'm not sure, I'm certain that in other countries it's very similar, that there's a lot of middle-aged women now who are homeless, and it's growing. So these are all the things that we have to be mindful of. All athletes, male and females, it is important to start to think about your financial literacy, and make better decisions and learn how to manage your money a bit better, learn how to save from a younger age. And for women, it's very, very important. So start understanding how you can grow your wealth, how you can save. You can still do your competitions, how to avoid debt, how to not get into credit card debt, what investments might be better for you, whether you want to save for a house, or maybe you want to save for shares and have a passive income in the future. These are all the things that, coming from, my parents came from Poland, and they were under, communist rule, and they didn't really have a lot of their own personal wealth, and they weren't really trusting of the banks growing up. So they were never really taught, and we were never taught definitely how to understand money and grow money. So that's what I would encourage young people, older people, any age, is it should be part of your ABCs, your English, your languages, your maths, is actually learning this. Yeah. So that's
Sometimes that financial education probably is more important than certain topics that you learn in school, but you never mention They never taught you how to save money, how
Yeah.
to not get debt.
Yeah, definitely. It's so important, and you have to have that awareness and the how to understand money and not get into debt and start to be mindful of how that you can set yourself up in the future and have a financial buffer. With a lot of people now, when the virus have, realized they had no emergency funds, and then they lost their homes or they lost their jobs, and they're in a very difficult position. So how you can be a little bit more prepared for these unexpected events in your life. Sometimes I know with my sister, she was a very good saver, but she had her knee operation and didn't have insurance, and that was $5,000 just gone like that. And it all adds up instead of her being able to save that money for having additional money for house. So insurances, knowing what to do there too, and then emotional awareness and understanding your mind, understanding your relationships. I think that's also something we have this conversation that with many people that should be taught in school, and I would encourage everyone to do more self-reflection. There's so many online courses you can do. When I work with my mental coach, we do a lot of work of why am I thinking this way? Is it real? Is it not? Is it something that's really important? What can I let go of? What's serving me now? What is my life philosophy? And I think that too many people maybe start thinking about this when it's too late, or when they're in their 50s or 60s, or when they get sick, when it's like, no, start doing it when you're younger. Be really mindful of how you want to live your life, how you're treating people, if your lifestyle is really helping you or if it's working against you. And you're leading from a place where you're consciously making decisions which are going to better your life, which are good for your values, good for your soul.
Great. Uh, how do you use? I'm guessing a little. How do you use your spare time? Do you have any hobby besides Taekwondo?
Usually it's sleeping because I love naps. I'm trying to read a little bit more. When it was open, we loved going to the movies. So I love film. I love international foreign films that have, crazy storylines, even like old 80s films, old martial art films. And I also love to paint and draw, even though I haven't been doing that as much as often. I like to write poetry, songs. Yeah, probably that creative. It's visit my dogs. I love animals, so I love visiting my parents' dogs and giving them like cuddles and looking up dog adoption sites, browsing that. And so I love reading about like creative people and seeing what they're up to, and study. So in my spare time, like I usually try to stay on top of my readings for university and my assignments, and eating out. So when we can, if we're not dieting for a competition, then meeting with friends and having like a good meal somewhere.
You enjoy this flat white?
Oh, very good. Very Australian. I saw this question. Yes.
What is that?
So flat white is a fancy name for coffee and milk, pretty much. It's a popular coffee in Australia. So it's a coffee shot. Some places in Europe do 2 shots. In Australia, it's typically 1 shot and with hot milk, but there's no froth. So it's called a flat white because unlike a latte that's got that froth, it's just flat. So it's a no fuss coffee for those that just, some people love the lattes to get the froth off. Flat white is just simple milky goodness.
What purchase of less than $100 has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
Very good question. I did think about this. It would have to be my books, and I bought the books from like secondhand stores as well, and I was given it as a voucher, and I think that's a great gift. If you're going to give someone something, get them a book voucher, because they're not likely going to buy a book themselves, but if you get them a book voucher, they'll use it. So I think the books which I've read that have started to make me a lot more aware of my financial journey and where my mind is at have impacted my life, and probably coffee too. So that has given me a lot of happiness in my life. And
Great.
I think I bought a plant too. So that makes me happy. I got that from the market.
A plant. What kind of plant?
It's like it's an indoor one, but it's called something monstrous,
Monstrous. Okay,
monstrous.
great.
But it's an easy to look after plant. I'm not the best, but I try.
If you could have a gigantic billboard that anybody in the world could see, which message would you put on in a message for the whole world?
This is really hard. So I know billboards, you can't have an essay, and I would struggle not to put an essay up on a billboard because there's so many things I want to tell the world. But it would be something like, oh, gosh. I'd want to say something like confronting. So my advertising mind would be like, death to the ego. Like,
To the ego.
yeah, no, but it's more like, oh God, something maybe that might scare people. But do the work. Do the work on yourself. Do that work on yourself. You have to self-reflect. Where are you going? What are your values? Who do you want to be in the world? What really matters? And do that work on your ego, on your biases. That to me is true success. It's not monetary things. It's not, houses and cars. Like the hardest thing you can do, the most successful thing you can do is really challenge, like, how am I being? How am I treating others? And what am I doing for the community? How am I serving this world? Am I going to be proud of what I've done? And find your spirituality. I would encourage people to do that. And I am in touch with my religion. I do believe in God, and I know that over time that it's it can look to be unpopular, but it's so important. It is part of our humanity, and I would encourage people to reconnect with their spirituality, to the oneness, to a way of life which is, I think, really wholesome, and it will serve you. The more you put in the work, then I think it brings you a lot of joy and good things in your life. So I would encourage people to do that. So all of that in a nice billboard.
Great. What is the best investment you've ever made?
Oh, good question. It would definitely, it would just be in my dreams and the dreams of others. So when I've had funding and I've put it towards going overseas to tournaments, or I've had extra funding and I've given it to my sister or my brother so they can have less stress and they can go. That's for me has always been the best investment. And study, like the course which I did in performance, like anything where you're learning, you're growing. Those have been the best investments.
Great. What advice would you give to a 13-year-old starting to compete in Taekwondo?
I would say, congratulations. You have begun your adventure in this crazy sport, Taekwondo. I would say surround yourself by good people that want the best for you. I would say listen to the good things. Don't listen to anyone wanting to stop you or put you down. I'm not talking just about, take on feedback, but don't let it put you down. Like, feedback's just to grow and to make you better, and believe in yourself and know that it's so important. Like, one of my favorite like quotes and sayings is like, reach for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll be among the stars.
Right.
And that's what a Taekwondo journey is. I think be consistent, have good habits, surround yourself with good people that want the best for you, and keep going, keep persevering. Like there's gonna be the hard times, and it's gonna be tough, but it's gonna be worth it.
Right. Is there any bad recommendations you hear in the Taekwondo environment competition? Something you don't agree with?
Many. Again, like I think it has to change. So bad advice in the competition, I would recommend all young athletes, parents and coaches, in terms of the dieting side and weight divisions, get professional help, because we have seen too many illnesses, injuries, even deaths in our sport because that hasn't been managed properly. And especially young athletes, you want them to form good habits young. You don't want them to have extreme dieting habits. You don't want them to have dehydration from a young age. Get them working with a professional, get them to learn about food, good food relationships, so then they can carry that onto their senior life. And then the parents understand that too. They're not coming up with their own ideas, even though they might be wanting to be helpful. The well-being of the child is ultimate, and of the athlete. So that's all athletes, all ages, that side. For parents or for coaches, I think the bad advice is there's too much at times negative or putting down or shaming after bad performances, training sessions or competitions, which is not necessary. And culturally, I believe that needs to change in our sport. Of course, if you make a mistake, or that you didn't follow the strategy, or you didn't listen, there's a more effective way to deliver that information. And coaches have the responsibility to learn and upskill themselves so they can be more effective without damaging or putting down a child or an athlete. So that's what I think needs to change, because again, you don't need, like a child or an athlete, it doesn't need to feel shamed, because then you've messed up that whole loop of what it means to be an athlete. You're supposed to learn, you're supposed to make mistakes, and then you grow, and then you're better next time. But if you put someone down or you're too negative, you slow down that process and you push them down, which makes it harder for them to come back up, or they might not eventually come back up at all. So I would like that to sort of be cut out. Definitely, like if you did the wrong kick, or you didn't follow instructions, or you made a silly decision, whatever, like you need to know those things, but there's a way, there's a more effective way, a more neutral or positive way to be able to deliver that, and it's still going to be effective, and the athlete's still going to learn, and they're still going to progress.
Great. In the last 5 years, what new behavior, habit, or skill has most improved your life?
The last 5 years. So probably what's challenged it, and then I've had to sort of come around full circle, was technology, getting used to that, getting used to social media, because I didn't have that growing up. So you are a lot more in the screen or on your phone, and I've had to develop habits where I shut off my phones either on the other side of the bed or on the room, where I'm at bed at a more regular time. So I think that even though it's great and it's helped our lives to stay more connected, it's come with challenges, which only after a couple of years you realize that it's had a negative impact on you, because it can mean that, all right, usually after training I would brush my teeth, maybe have something to eat, or the other way around, and then start like going to bed, quieting up and sleeping, maybe read a book, have a chat, if I was still at home with my sister and friend, and engage that way, when now it's like eat something while you're eating on the phone, but into bed on your phone, still flicking through. So I've had to change those habits, because I got sucked in. Like, it was new, it was exciting. You can still speak to friends on your phone when, as an athlete, in terms of your recovery, and I know how important it is for me to have good sleep and proper sleep and not miss that time to sleep. And especially, I think there's been studies done which said that if you go to sleep before 10 o'clock, you're more likely to get into that deep sleep. So yeah, that's for me, having an awareness of technology, when to switch off, put strategies in place where I'm not tempted to use it, I think is really important, and not to be stimulated the whole time. It's like having an extra TV on the phone or an extra magazine on the phone. So yeah, that's what has helped me. It's been tough at first, but now having that awareness has helped me in my life. And I'd encourage others to do it also.
Great. Last question. When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do to be on your way again?
Very good question. So sometimes physically stepping away from where you are. So if something's making you stressed or emotional, take a few steps away, I find helps. Maybe go into another room, maybe go outside to get some fresh air, and then focus on your breathing. So in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then really trying to relax my shoulders down. And then you start with positive thoughts, positive affirmations, trying to rationalize, because usually your emotions can take over, and that's when you can get stressed. That's when you need the sense to bring it down. So whether it's at competition and you remind yourself, you've done the training, you're a little bit more tense because you're at a competition, but it's fine. Nothing's happened yet. This is part of the process, and breathe and bring it down. And you need to, if you are mindful, you need to be at a level which is going to serve you for what you do. So if I'm at competition, I can't be too relaxed. Otherwise, I'm not going to fight at my best. Because after a couple of years, I've realized for me to fight at my best, I need to be a bit more tense. Having a little bit of stress or tension, maybe 30% is good. But I need to be more aggressive. I need to build that tension up to a good level where I'm going to be ready to fight. Someone like my brother, everyone's going to be completely different. My brother, for example, he can't be too stressed. If he's too stressed and sometimes his eyes are like wide and I try to be like, come on, be strong, that's not good for him. He needs to breathe. He needs to laugh. He needs to have a joke. When he jokes, it helps him relax. Go stand around someone that's going to make you laugh or have a joke with. If you find that someone's going to make you more tense, then stay away from them and be around someone else which is going to make you feel the way that you need to be in that moment, the way that's going to best serve you. So again, it's just about doing that reflection. What do I need right now? If I'm about to fight, yeah, it's good to have a little bit of stress, a bit of focus, what's good for you at a good level that's good for you. But in between fights or any other day, you don't need to be so stressed and nervous or tense. And it's like, right now, I'm okay. I'm safe. I can come back down. I can calm down. But yeah, I hope that helps and explains it a little bit more.
Great advice. It's been all the questions. I don't know if you want to add another thing, something that you want to say.
I didn't think about this. I would just like to say that I hope, as hard as it is, people stick with sport, with what's happening now in the world with COVID and the lockdowns. And I know there's a lot of clubs suffering and shutting down, but keep being active, keep connecting with your friends and your family, do some training, and once everything sort of goes back to normal, get back into Taekwondo. Even if just turn up, be a robot, get in your car, on your bike, walk, drive, turn up to training, and it will be good again. So I just, would like to thank you for your time today, and for everyone listening, thank you very much. I wish you all the best in your Taekwondo journeys or your life journeys, and I hope that today has been helpful or useful to you, even if it's one bit that's connected with you.
I think it will be. Thanks a lot, Carmen. It's been a pleasure to interview you. It's as I always say in these interviews, it's a great opportunity to learn from a world-class athlete, but so normally it reflects you are a world-class athlete, but normally reflects on a great person. So it's been a pleasure to learn from you. I'll let you know when I publish the interview.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it, and thank you for providing us with this platform and sharing our experiences. Like we don't often get this, and we have a lot of life experience because of the sport, and the whole goal is for people to suffer less and to learn our lessons faster so they don't have to go through what we went through. And yeah, I just applaud you. I'm very grateful that you're connecting us to, you know, the rest of the world and the community. Yeah, it's great work that you're doing. So thank you very much, Luis.
Thank you very much, Carmen.